All right, so China is celebrating national holiday, and U.S. Government is shutting down. Well, I don't quite understand that normally they would have a CR, continued resolution. So this time the two parties are so, I guess, so divided or something. They don't even have a CR. What is your take on this whole shutdown?
Well, I mean, I didn't spend very much time on this because this is the kind of theatre and psychodrama that the United States goes in for. I mean, I suspect that the reason it's happened is because it suits every party. It suits
Mhm.
Trump because
Mhm.
he thinks he can embarrass the Democrats. It suits the Democrats because they can tell their base, look, we're actually standing up to this evil despot and tyrant Donald Trump. It
Yeah.
suits the Republicans because they can then pretend that they're the people of sound finance responsibility when I mean they're nothing of the sort. So we go through this regular ritual because it happens quite often now. This regular ritual, which usually lasts a few days, and then some kind of compromise is patched up, and the underlying story is that the financial position of the US government just deteriorates because the debt burden ultimately continues to rise. And nothing is ever done to actually reorganize, or if you prefer to use the word reform, the federal bureaucracy, which simply goes on getting bigger and bigger. And so, I mean, I don't take this seriously, except that, again, what it shows is that in the United States, government, actual government in the functional sense, doesn't exist anymore. I mean, it arguably doesn't exist anywhere in the West. I mean,
Mhm.
what you get is theatre and performance, but you don't have a president, a cabinet, which is really focused on addressing the underlying problems of the country and in providing actual government in a way that people will notice.
I totally agree. I really think it's right now the U.S. government is not functioning. Not just Trump. I think it's not.
Yeah.
There's so many things not working, but like the Congress, Johnson, Speaker, he refused to swear in a newly elected Congresswoman from Arizona. There's a special election, and
Yeah.
this woman, Adelita Guryaba, I think I've got her name right.
Yeah.
She won it's a fair and square kind of election, and she won the seat. But Johnson refused to swear her in. And the main reason apparently, now Johnson never admitted to that, but he said, okay, we don't have a regular session. I will swear her in the regular session. Well, part of the reason they don't want to have a regular session is they don't want to, supposedly, they don't want the Democrat to push through their bill to keep the government open. But
Yes.
there's another layer of that is there is Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene. They are putting forward a bill to force a vote on release the Epstein file.
Yeah.
Okay, and they need one vote. They have 217, and this one woman would be that of 218 vote. And Johnson doesn't want that vote, so
No.
doesn't. As a result, he doesn't swear her in. How can you do
Exactly.
that? That's his
Well,
job. How can
Well, again, when governments are reduced to this kind of thing, when it's all down to wire pulling
yeah,
and abusive procedures.
yeah,
By the way, we have lots of that in Britain today. I mean, that goes on all the time here. But when that happens, when a political system is reduced to something of that kind, then you are entitled to talk about decay. I
yeah,
mean, it is a proper, functional, dynamic system full of energy and purpose simply doesn't work in that way. I mean, I again, as somebody who did train as a historian, I
mm,
can say that absolutely conclusively. I mean, backstairs maneuvers, wire pulling, use of procedures, lawfare, all of these are signs of increasing dysfunction of a political system that is losing control and is abusing the instruments of power in order to retain it.
yeah. And by the way, you were talking about this Epstein shadow is all, Now, it just came out that Sarah Ferguson is somehow there's a
Yeah,
scandal related to that as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
It just
yes.
shadows all the time. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And now she's the divorced wife of Prince Andrew,
Hmm.
and it turns out that separately from Andrew, she too was a friend of Epstein's. Now he clearly had an agenda
Hmm.
of getting close to the British royal family. I mean, he was clearly working to that end. I mean, it's not a coincidence that all of these people were his friends, but it is very interesting, and it's very interesting that Peter Mandelson, who we
Hmm.
talked about in a recent
Yeah,
program, was also his friend.
yeah,
And it does beg many questions again about why Epstein was so interested in Britain. Just
yeah,
say,
yeah. And in general, I feel like Sarah and Andrew, they're kind of bad news for the royal family. I feel
oh,
like
yeah, absolutely.
I
Yeah,
lost
absolutely.
that.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, well, they have been for a very long time. I mean, Ferguson deeply embarrassed the royal family
Yeah,
by having a public affair
yeah,
while she was still married to Andrew back in the 90s. And Andrew has always been considered rather dim
yeah,
and laddish. And anyway, the Epstein business brought all that out into the open.
yeah.
But I mean, none of the others, it must be said, are particularly attractive either. I mean,
Yeah.
the Queen, the late Queen, was a figure of dignity
Hmm. Yeah. Hmm.
and did possess genuine self control. She was not always, by the way, particularly nice. And I know that there were some people who did not like her.
Hmm.
But anyway, the public image was was a good one.
Hmm.
But everyone, no one else can that be said, including, it must be said, the current king.
Yeah. 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 Well, we'll see. The Epstein, like you said, that the Epstein just never disappear. It's
No,
always
no, it's always hovering. Absolutely, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. The other thing got lots of attention, I think probably around the world, not just in China, but certainly lots of people talking about is this all the generals, all the high-ranking officials
Yeah.
now are called to DC to have a meeting by Pete Hegseth and the Donald Trump giving speech. Now, what exactly the purpose of this meeting? What's your take on that?
Well, you couldn't have worked anything out from listening to the speeches that Hegseth and Trump delivered, because they were absolutely empty. They were one cliche after another, sometimes expressed in very coarse language. But I mean, the idea that you would call 800 senior military
Uh-huh.
officers to tell them things like that is ludicrous. I mean, you could, by the way, see the faces of some of these people, and they were obviously very angry at
Mhm.
having been pulled from their various posts to come to a meeting and to have to listen to nonsense like that. Now, Eve Smith, who is the editor in chief of Naked Capitalism, which is a very, very good website, by the way, a
Mhm.
very interesting news site, and whom I slightly know and think
Yeah.
highly
I,
of.
mhm.
She has suggested that, in fact, the real purpose of this meeting was to provide cover for other secret meetings that might have been taking place in
Mhm.
private between Trump and Hegseth and some senior military officials, to brief them about plans to start wars in potentially one of two or perhaps both places. One is against Venezuela. And
Mhm.
I should say that I'm getting friends of mine in the United States are contacting me, and they're telling me that they know people in the military who are being called in and told that to get ready for war. And the country that's been talked about is Venezuela. So,
Okay.
it does look very likely now that an attack on Venezuela is just round the corner, just
Mhm.
hours or perhaps days away. So that might have been one thing that these people were all talking about, or some of these people were talking about. But I think the other one, the big one, is Iran.
Oh.
And there's been reports in the Russian media, and you'd never see these in the European media, but
Yeah.
the Russian media is full of reports about massive transfers of fighter jets and fuel supply planes in the United States to Europe. And the Russians think that this looks like it could be either a rehearsal or preparation for a major strike on Iran.
Okay. Yeah, from the surface, it looks like a loyalty test. He did
Mm.
kind of like ask if you don't
Yeah,
like me, like what I'm saying, you can leave. But then there goes your rank, and
yes.
yeah, so the loyalty test. And then some pep talks and photo op, I guess. So, but I guess it makes
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, again, it's extremely funny that they're talking about loyalty tests in the United States and about the president not trusting his military. I don't know whether people in China know about this. I mean, it's an absolutely preposterous story
Mhm.
that Xi Jinping is sacking generals all over the place because he's facing pressure. And I've even seen one absolutely ludicrous report. I mean, crazy report that he's not even anymore in control and that China is being run by a military committee. So the same people who are spreading these stories in the United States, and you're quite right, are the same people who support the president and the secretary of war, which we must now
Secretary of
call
the
them,
War, yeah.
who are worried about the loyalty of the US military.
Yeah.
So there you go. A wonderful example of how by the way, I agree. I mean, they were talking in that way of projection. So you're worried about the loyalty of your own military, and you pretend you spread absolutely. I mean, not just groundless, but I mean comically wrong stories
Yeah.
about some kind of crisis like that in China.
So, well, in China, of course, they mainly wonder whether they are talking about some potential war with China. So you don't think at
No,
this time they're doing that because even on the surface, we don't hear a lot of report, but there
no,
has been constantly the Philippines are creating some troubles, and of course, there's endless military drills that U.S. is doing now. It's not even getting much reported now because
I
it's so
know.
often. The US is doing it today with a joint drill with the Philippines, tomorrow with Australia or with Japan. They have been doing that all the time now. It's almost like a daily routine now. So the situation in around the China, it looks calm on the surface, but it's not, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think a number of things to say. Firstly, if they do attack Venezuela and they do attack Iran, be absolutely clear that this is ultimately about China. It
Mhm.
always is about China. I was reading an equally crazy article by Conrad Black. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was a Canadian businessman, very, very close friend of Trump's. He used to own the Daily Telegraph in Britain, but he had to give it up. And he went to prison for a short time because of
Mhm.
financial malpractice. But he's back and he's very close to Trump. And again, I mean, he said quite clearly that Trump's attempt to be conciliatory to Russia was all about getting Russia away from
Mhm.
China.
Mhm.
And there was all the usual nonsense scare stories that, if Russia continued to be friends with China, then China would be pushed by China to lease Siberia to China, and China would transfer 40 million people there. These things. It seems incredible to say this, but this kind of uh, mad reporting is actually becoming dangerously common now.
Mhm.
So, there is this incredible hostility and animosity to China, and it is always there. You got glimpses of it in Trump's speech to the military officers. So,
Mhm.
I'm afraid I can't discount this. I
Yeah.
can't discount the possibility that they are talking about a war with China. And I'm sure you are aware that the Pentagon has apparently told the missile producers that we need to increase missile production fourfold, by
Mhm.
4 times,
Mhm.
in order to keep up with the Chinese, which is impossible, by the way. I mean, again, I worked in industry. I know about how industry functions in the West, at least. It is impossible to achieve a fourfold increase in missile production in the West on anything like the kind of timescales that are being talked about. American industry is not structured that way. It cannot do it like this. I mean, China, where you have completely different economies of scale and entirely different organizational and management systems, you probably could.
Mhm.
And of course, the Russians can, and their industrial system is different. But in the United States, it cannot be done. I mean, it simply cannot be done. All they will do is that they will increase the price. They will throw money at this problem, which will increase the unit cost per missile and not result in many more missiles being produced. But put that all aside, the fact that they're talking in this way again speaks of some kind of preparation for a war with China. And then,
Mhm.
of course, we also have the story that was I don't know whether it was published in the U.S. media, but it was all over the British media, that supposedly Russian paratroopers are training Chinese
Uh-huh.
paratroopers,
Mhm.
as if Chinese paratroopers need training. I mean,
Uh-huh.
we won't go down. We won't go. But again, this is clearly being explained as part of some preparation for some kind of attack on Taiwan.
Uh-huh.
And lastly, there's a story that Xi Jinping apparently wants Donald Trump to make some kind of public commitment that the United States actively opposes Taiwanese independence. And this is somehow
Mhm.
supposedly an incredibly threatening and very dangerous thing that the Chinese are doing. The United States said back in the 1970s that it opposed Taiwan's independence. So what is new there?
Mhm. Well,
But
the
you could see the rhetoric. So
Mhm.
given the rhetoric, given the madness and hysteria there is abroad, how can I say definitely that an
Mhm.
attack, a war with China, is not possible? I don't think it is likely because I think China is too strong
Mhm.
and they know it. And I think also the talk about quadrupling missile production shows that they know at some level that China is too strong. But, Medvedev, who's the Russian
Mhm.
um, senior Russian official, when talking about a war in Europe, he said exactly the same thing as I'm going to say now about China. He said, there is no logical, rational reason to think that a war in Europe is going to begin. But given how mad some people are, you can't discount the possibility entirely.
Mhm.
And given the madness there is in the United States about China, you can't discount that possibility entirely. I don't expect it,
Mhm.
but I would think it would be very, very complacent to think it's not going to happen.
Yeah, the article you're talking about, Washington Post had an article about
Mhm.
that, and about
Yeah.
China with the help of Russia and they always and they always use the word the timeline like 2027.
Yeah.
They tend to believe that before 2027, China is going to try to reunify with Taiwan.
Yeah.
But I don't know where they get that year. But nonetheless, that's what they're talking about. Yeah, so I saw that article. I even made a program of it. And I think
China needs Russia to train its paratroopers. I mean,
yeah.
anyway, I'm not going to go there anyway.
Well, and then also recently the U.S. House Armed Service Committee, they had a few members, 3 members visited China.
Yeah.
And plus, there is one, those three
Yeah.
are Democrats, and then there is one Republican from the Foreign Affairs
Mm.
Committee. So the 4 of them visited China. And one thing it does seem like they have been talking about is that they think that there is no regular communications between the two militaries, the US and the China, is a dangerous thing, which I agree. I do think
Yeah.
that's a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
But of course, they never mentioned that US and China military had the regular communications until Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. So she's the
Exactly.
one who,
I know.
I
No,
guess, caused
well,
this.
they never say that. The other thing about that visit, which was, I agree, it was a positive sign,
Hmm.
and Xi Jinping and Trump had a telephone conversation,
Hmm.
and that also seemed a positive sign. But we are now getting into this very dangerous situation with this administration, where it appears to engage in diplomacy, and all it is doing is lulling the other side
Yeah,
into some kind of false sense of complacency, and then it
yeah.
launches an attack. It did that with Iran.
Mhm.
in June.
Yeah.
And it did that, as we remember, with Hamas and Qatar just a
Mhm.
few weeks of just 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying they're doing the same in China. It would be a very crazy thing
Mhm.
to do it with China, but you can never be completely sure
Yeah.
about these
Yeah.
things.
Uh-huh.
And yes, I agree. Contacts with the Chinese military contacts are necessary, but ultimately it's American actions that have caused them to break down.
Mhm.
And contacts between militaries can only go so far anyway if the political relations are not fixed.
Yeah, and then apparently also after they left, there's some leak come out in the Chinese media saying another purpose of their trip is to ask for rare earth. Apparently, that's what they're trying to do.
Well,
So,
that's what he's really. Well, that's obviously then what he's really all about. Because,
yeah.
I mean, going back to that story about producing 4 times more
Mhm.
missiles, how are you going to do that if
Mhm.
you don't have the rare earths? Because rare earths are essential. So they
Mhm.
want China to provide the rare earths so that they can produce the missiles with which they will attack China.
Yeah.
By the way, on that, they're now complaining that they've given money to the Argentine government to stabilize its finances, and that Argentina is now selling soybeans to
To
China.
China.
Yeah,
Yeah. 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 Besson had a text, apparently. Somebody spotted.
yeah,
Yeah. That's an
yeah.
interesting story. Okay.
Well,
Uh,
it tells you how China is at the center of
of everything.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah.